When I was little, I went back to my hometown for winter break. Uncle took me up the mountain to hunt wild rabbits. We chased after the rabbit tracks. Suddenly a thick fog rolled in. I cried out hastily, "Uncle, it seems we've chased into the old woods." Uncle's face went deathly pale. "Shit, get out quickly. Those rabbit tracks were wrong just now." In my panic, I fell and hurt my leg. I was about to cry out in pain when Uncle clamped his hand tightly over my mouth. I vaguely saw a figure like someone wearing a fur coat and a hat walking toward the two of us from deep in the woods. Uncle quickly lay down, hoisted me onto his back, and started crawling out of the woods. Once out of the woods, Uncle lifted me and ran. I asked, "Uncle, why are you running?" Uncle trembled and said, "Shadow." "Shadow?" I asked strangely, "What shadow?" Uncle said breathlessly, "It's the one your nanny always talks about, the shadow that eats naughty children. The one we just saw was that one." I stammered, "No way. He looked just like a person to me." "Shut up, don't make a sound." Uncle's voice couldn't hide his terror as he broke into a faster run. As soon as he entered the yard, he hurriedly bolted the door. My grandfather came out to meet him. "Jack, why are you all sweaty? Go warm yourself by the fire quickly, don't." Before my grandfather could finish speaking, Uncle interrupted, "Dad, I saw Shadow." My grandfather's sallow face instantly turned dark purple. "Did you go into the old woods?" Uncle gave a guilty in response. My grandfather slapped him squarely across the face. "That old forest hasn't been entered by anyone for over 20 years, and you go and invite trouble by going in. The old forest was the village's unwritten forbidden zone. The previous person who mistakenly entered never came out. The whole village heard him wail in agony for half an hour, yet no one dared to go in and look. I and Uncle had committed a grave taboo." Uncle covered his swollen half-face and protested, "I was chasing a rabbit. The fog made it hard to see, so I went in." Grandfather drew a deep breath and asked, "How do you know it was Shadow?" He stretched out his arm toward Tunya and waved. That arm was almost 2 meters long. I thought for a moment and said, "That waving arm must have caught on a branch, making it look that long." "Uncle, that fur, it's black, with a ring of yellow around the neck. Isn't that the spirit Shadow?" "Me, that yellow part looks to me like a neck warmer." My grandpa, "Jack, did you really see it clearly? Shadow coming out of the woods is a deadly matter. It's almost New Year, don't get it wrong. No one can have a peaceful New Year." Uncle thought for a moment and also became less certain. "I guess that's probably it." My grandfather lowered his head and paced back and forth for quite a while. Finally, with a heavy expression, he said, "Close all the doors. I'll go find the village head. Don't open the door for anyone." My grandmother went back inside, grabbed several skyrockets, and stuffed them into my grandfather's pocket. My grandpa stepped out with his dry tobacco pipe in his mouth. The whole house instantly became tense. I was so frightened I broke out in a cold sweat. Shadow was more or less every child's nightmare around here. A nursery rhyme has long been passed down here. Red eyes, green nose for hairy hooves. It walks with a clack and wants to eat living children. It was talking about Shadow. The legend says Shadowy's over 2 meters tall, has green eyes the size of lanterns, can leap more than 10 meters in a single bound, and loves to come out at night to snatch and eat children. It eats people from the inside out. First it pulls out the organs. After finishing them, the person still looks like an intact skin sack. Then it pulls out the bones one by one and chews and chews. After chewing them, it stuffs the skin sack with grass to prop it up so it still looks like a living person. He propped that straw man up at your doorstep. He kept watch beside it. When someone in the house opened the door and came out, it ate them. It continued until the whole family was finished. Finally, it would eat the skin. When the skin was finished, it would go to the next house. Whenever a child cried at night, the adults would say, "Don't cry. Shadow will hear and come for you." The child dared not cry anymore. I stopped believing in the existence of Shadow after I started elementary school, thinking it was just a tale to scare children. But looking at my grandfather's and uncle's expressions, it seemed like it really existed. I asked my grandmother, "Is there really a shadow? Have you seen it?" My grandmother swallowed and said, "It really exists. Over by the old grove, someone lived there more than 20 years ago. Whenever a family had a newborn, it would come out of the woods at night to prey on them. At that time, one family had newborn twins, a boy and girl. They were eaten by that shadow down to nothing. From then on, anyone in the village who was going to give birth would hide out in the fields. If there were no newborns, it would start with the small children. Later, it didn't matter whether they were adults or children. If it caught them, it ate them. It stood up taller than the houses. Its eyes were bigger than our rice bowls, and they were green. A few disgruntled young men teamed up to kill it, but in the end, not even its skin was left. In the end, the whole village joined together and blew it up with a mountain cannon. The corpse lay there, and it took 8 strong men to lift it. They dug a pit, threw it in, burned it, then buried the ashes. I haven't seen that in over 20 years. Could there really still be one? Uncle seemed as if he had lost his soul. Mother, I think that's the one. The first time I saw him, I felt he wasn't like a human. If you say he's a person, what would he be doing in the old woods? Besides, in our village, which person don't I know? I never saw that person. If you say it was a passerby, they wouldn't have gotten to the old grove, right? I was looking at it. It had to be about 2 meters tall. We were talking when we suddenly heard a deafening noise. Bang, bang, bang. Firecrackers exploded in the direction of the village head's house. Oh no, my father. Uncle shouted and ran outside. I grabbed Uncle by the arm. Don't go out yet. It might not have been set off by your father. There are so many households in the village that have these skyrockets. Uncle, it's not noon. What family's got nothing better to do than set off skyrockets? My grandma. You never can tell. If you run out like that, you'll be courting death if you meet Shadow. How did you all get out of the woods just now? Uncle, I crawled out. There are 4 footprints on the ground. It's an animal. It won't be able to tell it's human. My grandmother breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. Shadow comes out of the woods only when people lead it out. Today you crawled out. He couldn't tell you were human, so it wouldn't follow. I thought for a moment and said, Grandma, that's not right. It came out. It followed, right behind us. My grandma's face went deathly pale. You really saw him come out of the woods? I saw him. He was just a short distance behind us. Uncle startled. Behind us? I said, yeah. He even waved at me, and it seemed like he called my name. Uncle went pale and slumped down onto the stool. That's it. If it can stand on 2 legs and speak, it's become a demon. Whoever it sets its sights on, that family will be wiped out. My grandmother hurriedly asked me, did he ask you and did you agree? Uncle won't let me make a sound, and his voice was all hissing and rattling, kind of scary, so I didn't agree. I said, Grandma told me to quickly take off the red padded coat I was wearing and change into black clothes. I asked why we changed clothes. Grandma said, Shadow stares at people. It won't stop until it's finished eating. If you don't answer, it can't remember your voice. You change your clothes. Before the words were finished, we heard heavy pa-pa-pa footsteps outside the yard wall. It was clearly the sound of a large living creature. My grandma and Dunkley exchanged a glance. They hurried back into the house and bolted another door. My grandma whispered, Jack, this probably won't do. Give the village head a call and see if your father has gone over. Uncle quickly called the village head's house. At that time, just a few years after the reform and opening, mobile phones were rare and precious. Everyone stayed in touch by landline. The village chief's home was for officials. Our house was the small shop. In the whole village, only our house and the village chiefs had phones. Uncle called over, and the village chief's phone rang for a long time with no answer. Uncle was trembling. There's no way the village chief wouldn't answer the phone at a time like this, right? My grandma, call again. Uncle redialed the number. Still no answer. Even my grandmother couldn't help but doubt. Impossible. At a time like this, the village head isn't here, and his wife should be at home. Isn't it almost noon? Time for lunch? At that moment, I heard the papa footsteps walk by and then come back. They stopped right at the gate of our courtyard. I could feel something peering inside through the crack in the door. The hair all over my body stood on end. Knock, knock, knock. The courtyard gate was knocked. My grandmother held me. My hands trembled uncontrollably. Uncle picked up a machete and stood guard behind the door. The 3 of us stayed silent. A few seconds passed. Knock, knock, knock. The door was knocked 3 more times. The voice grew heavier. Uncle, mustering his courage, called out, "Who?" "It's me, my grandpa's voice," I exclaimed with joy. "Grandpa is back." Saying that, I tried to rush out to open the door. My granny grabbed me sharply. "That's not your grandpa." "But that's my grandpa's voice," I said. Uncle also said, "That's my father's voice." I couldn't be mistaken. Saying that, he was about to pull the latch open. At that moment, my grandpa's anxious voice came from outside the door. "Quick, open the door. It's Shadow coming out of the woods." Uncle unlatched the door and went out to the yard, intending to open the gate. My granny grabbed him hard and whispered, "Jack, Jack, don't go. That definitely wasn't your father." Uncle paused. My grandma said, "Your father is impatient. He would never just knock 3 times when he knocked on the door." My hair stood on end. Recalling what was said before, Shadow would prop up those filled with straw at the doorway. You open the door, and one comes out and eats one. I couldn't stop my whole body from trembling. The people outside grew even more anxious, pounding on the door so hard it sounded like thunder. It was still Grandpa's voice. "Open the door quickly." My grandma gave meekly a look and then pointed at the ladder. Uncle understood at once. He scrambled up the ladder to the roof to see who was outside the door. After a while, he climbed back down. His legs were trembling. "The fog is too thick." He stood leaning against the door. You couldn't see clearly from the roof at all, but from the roof I could see a pointed head. My father isn't that tall, so it definitely wasn't him. The courtyard gate was struck even harder. It seemed like another couple of strikes, and it would be knocked down. I felt as if my blood had frozen. The 3 of us dared neither open the door nor keep it closed. I was so scared I couldn't catch my breath. Uncle's knees were still trembling. It was my grandmother who calmed down first. She shouted toward the yard gate, "Old man, wait a moment." He had me, Uncle, hide me in the coal pile first. That coal pile could hide both color and smell. "Tony, no matter what happens, don't make a sound, don't come out. Shadow can't find you." Grandma whispered to me. The person outside the door said, "Hurry up. If you lure Shadow here again, our whole family will be dead." My grandma said in terror, "We've really been Shadow's target." Uncle, gripping a machete, said in a trembling voice, "If it comes in, I'll fight it to the death. Ma, you take Tanya and climb over the ladder to Joe's house." My grandma said, "No. If Shadow gets into the house, you simply can't stop it. We both can't escape, even if we climb over. Then Shadow is afraid of gunpowder. Go get the firecrackers." At the time, we had no knives, guns, or clubs. We only managed to blow it to death with a mountain cannon. Luckily, New Year was coming, and our family had stockpiled a lot of fireworks and firecrackers. Uncle hauled half the yard in one go. The courtyard gate was already rattling from the pounding. A finger reached in through the crack of the door and hooked the latch. That finger was blackened. It definitely wasn't my grandfather's. It looked like it was about to unhook the latch. In the blink of an eye, Uncle snapped a string of sparking firecrackers and hurled it toward the door. Crackling and popping, the hand immediately recoiled. A couple of seconds later, my grandfather's voice came from outside the door. "Not a holiday or festival. What are you setting off firecrackers for in broad daylight?" Grandma breathed a sigh of relief. "Jack, it's your father." Saying that, she was about to go and open the door. This time, at Waste Uncle Ho stopped Grandma. "Mom, something's wrong." The finger that just reached through the crack in the door was definitely not my father's. My grandmother, "That's just the fog making you see it wrong." This voice and those words, it was certainly your father. My grandmother and Duncle were still arguing. I thought for a moment and said, "Didn't my grandpa take firecrackers when he went out? Why not just have him light one?" "That Shadowy's afraid of gunpowder. He definitely wouldn't dare to light it." My grandma said, "Exactly." She shouted toward the doorway. "Jack, your father, set off a couple of firecrackers to scare Shadow away from coming back inside. What will you light the firecrackers with now that the tobacco pipe is finished?" "And who sets off firecrackers at this hour?" A slightly impatient voice called from outside. It really sounded just like my grandfather. "That makes some sense." My grandmother hesitated. "Jack, if it's really your father, He's in danger out there. Uncle, true. If it's really Shadow, that door won't stop it. At that moment, a neighbor let out an utterly terrified shriek. Shadow! Shadow has entered the village. A scream. The tail of the sound trembled once and then vanished. My grandmother panicked. Jack, hurry! Open the door. Let your father into the house. I kept feeling that something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Uncle rushed over and tried to open the door. I couldn't hold it. The door opened. A dark shadow blocked the doorway. It really was my grandfather standing there. He had the village chief's little mongrel slung over his shoulder. My grandfather looked somewhat flustered and hastily pulled the main gate shut. I also hurriedly scrambled out from the coal pile. Susu asked in a trembling voice, Father, what did the village chief say? Just now Aunt might have had an accident. It must be Shadow that came into the village. I didn't go into the headman's house. I called out his door twice, but no one answered. And that dog kept jumping on me. It looked like the beast had been badly frightened. I felt something was wrong, so I hurried back. Did you set off that skyrocketing firework? When I turned to go home, I saw a dark figure standing in the fog ahead, just standing there. I couldn't see clearly. I called out once, and he answered, but I couldn't tell who it was. I threw a firecracker over, and then he disappeared. That thing feels off too. My uncle and my grandmother both let out a slight sigh of relief upon hearing that. It seems the one who knocked outside just now really was my grandfather. Uncle said, No wonder I thought you looked so tall from the roof. It was that dog standing on your shoulder. My grandfather. That beast was so scared it kept jumping onto me. I couldn't get off. So I just hoisted it up. Tony, damn. I think this one might be harder to deal with than the one from 20 years ago. My grandmother said, As long as it hasn't set its sights on our family, that's fine. Let's hurry and tell everyone in the village, too, and we'll all figure out some precautions together. My grandfather knocked his dry tobacco pipe twice in anger. Don't mention it. I went from house to house telling people, and not a single one believed me. He still asks if our family's firecrackers aren't selling and to think of a way to make people buy them. Damn it, good deeds taken for granted. I listened hard and thought intensely, and suddenly realized what was wrong. From the time my grandfather set off the firecrackers to when he walked back home, it would take at least 10 minutes. But after we heard the firecrackers, we quickly heard knocking at the door. I asked, Grandpa, how long have you been at the door? My grandpa, when you were setting off the firecrackers. You child, are you so scared you've gone stupid? When my grandfather finished speaking, my uncle, my grandmother, and I were all stunned. Really scared me stiff. My grandpa saw something was wrong with our expressions and hurriedly asked what happened. My grandma said, before we set off the firecrackers, someone was already knocking on the door. Their voice sounded just like yours. My grandfather's expression changed as well. That shadow must have come to our doorstep first after my grandfather drove it away with firecrackers. It was later driven off by Uncle with firecrackers. He had just returned after it left. He ran into Aunt as he was leaving, which is why Aunt let out that terrible scream. My grandfather's forehead is already sweating profusely. Damn it, this thing seems to be like a person. It has a brain. I called out to him from afar asking who it was, and he could mimic my voice. And it just so happened to knock on our door. Shadow speaks, and whoever hears it will die. It seems it really does want our lives. Uncle stammered. Maybe I think it's even more serious. Tony and I were hunting rabbits. It was like usual, following the rabbit tracks. Now that I think about it, those rabbit tracks later just weren't right. The front footprints are in front, the hind footprints are behind. It must have been chasing a rabbit at the time and didn't pay attention. I'm afraid those later footprints were its way of deliberately luring us into the old woods. At this point, my grandfather's brow furrowed tightly, his fists clenched, veins bulging. My grandmother bit her lip, her fingers rubbing the edge of her clothes hard. I couldn't help asking, Grandpa, Grandma, why did that shadow pick on our family? With so many people in the village, why did it choose our family? Is it because my uncleaned I went into the old woods and drew it out? My grandfather and my grandmother exchanged a look in an instant. My grandmother was about to say something, but my grandfather shook his head. My grandmother fell silent immediately. Uncle said, "Grandfather, why don't we call the police? Don't wait to have the village massacred. The police have guns, and there are more of them. They're definitely better equipped to deal with Shadow." My grandpa, "If you call the police and say there's a shadow in the village, will they believe you?" My grandma said, "Then we'll say someone in the village has been killed. I reckon the village chief's family and Joe's family have both been affected. We're not really lying. The police can't just ignore it, can they?" While he was speaking, the phone suddenly rang. It rang in a way that made everyone's heart jump. My grandfather picked it up, and we all gathered around the receiver to listen. Village head's voice. "Tony, old man, you came to see me today? What's the matter?" My grandfather, Shadow, came out of the old woods. Our Jack saw it. Joe's family seems to have encountered it too. The village chief laughed and said, "He really can pry things open. I just saw Joe's place. They were just at home cooking. But I saw it a moment ago too. It even came to my yard and knocked on the door." That was the geological survey team. I heard there's a gold mine over by Old Forest. The higher-ups sent a survey team. Well, I just got back from town. They were the ones who told me about it. Let's have our village cooperate with their work. As a result, they carried the equipment to your house and knocked on the door. And you not only didn't open it, you even used cannons to blow them up. My grandfather chuckled twice and said, "Oh dear, they didn't tell us in advance either. How are we supposed to know? This really is like the flood hitting the Dragon King's temple. Tell the exploration team for me that my old man will buy them drinks later to apologize." Having hung up, Uncle said, no wonder it sounded like heavy animals outside the door. Turns out it was the geology team carrying equipment. It's no wonder those fingers were so black. If they're from the geology team, that's not surprising. But sweat was pouring down my forehead. "Old man, something's wrong. That person knocking clearly said they're a shadow. Hurry and open the door." If he's from the geological survey team, how could he say that? My grandpa got anxious as soon as he heard it. Was the village chief tricked by that shadow? This thing is obviously smarter than his mother. I was stunned. My grandmother picked up the thread and said, "Then we should call the police. Whether it's true or not, it's still the lives of an entire village. If we report the wrong thing, at worst we'll just treat the police to a couple of big meals." Uncle picked up the phone and dialed, but his hand suddenly stopped, and he stood there stunned. The telephone line was cut. We were definitely still on the call just now. But after only a minute or two, the line went dead. What are the odds of that happening? It was already getting dark outside. The wind and snow, carrying a piercing chill, kept pouring into the inner room. This winter the wind and snow were especially fierce, as if they were determined to destroy the world. My whole body was freezing. I felt that thing right beside me. I could sense it, but I couldn't see it. Uncle said, "I'll go check the telephone line." We all understood that if the village chief didn't believe Shadow had entered the village, then this phone in our house would be the only channel to call for help from the outside world. My grandpa said, "You go check the telephone line. I'll go find the village chief again. He has a loudspeaker. I'll have him make an announcement. Whether they believe it or not, we still have to persuade him to tell everyone to be on guard." He started to run. My grandma grabbed him. "Tony, Grandpa, the sky is getting dark. It's too dangerous for you to go out now. Why don't you wait until tomorrow morning? In my hometown in winter, it gets dark especially quickly. Judging by the time, it would probably be dark in less than half an hour." My grandfather glared. "Did you forget Shadow likes to eat people most at what time? If you can't think of anything useful before dark, I'm afraid our whole village won't get through the night." I held my grandfather back as well. I don't know why, but I felt that once he left this time, it would be hard for him to come back. Grandpa tapped his pipe and packed another bowl of snuff tobacco. He took a couple of drags with a clack-clack. "Tony, damn it, whether there is Shadow or not, we both know. I definitely can't let him bring disaster to our village." My granny suddenly sank onto the stool. "It's all my fault for being soft-hearted." My grandpa, "You weren't wrong either. Watch Tony and Jack. I'll come back and knock on the door. 3 heavy knocks and 2 light ones. Open the door again when you hear that knocking." My grandfather said this as he was about to go out. Uncle was also going to go out to check the phone line. Back then, the telephone wires were mostly strung in the air. By following the line, it was easy to find where it had been cut. I grabbed Uncle and said, "Uncle, don't go out. If you go out, it will be just me and my grandma left. Then Shadow comes. What will we do?" I was indeed terribly frightened, and I felt that Shadow was watching our house. My grandpa thought for a moment. That telephone line was run over from the headman's house. I went by and took a look while I was there. "You stay home and watch Tony." After saying that my grandfather left, I suddenly thought of Aunt, so I asked my grandmother. Aunt screamed. We all heard it. Didn't anyone at his house react? Normally at a time like this, with someone dead, both young and old would have started crying long ago. His house was right next to ours. It was impossible for them not to have heard. At that moment, a crackling sound suddenly came from his house. Uncle quietly climbed a ladder over the wall to take a peek. I could see him trembling violently even from under the ladder. After a little while, Uncle clambered down the ladder, rolling and crawling. He grabbed me and my grandma and rushed into the house, bolting the door. "Mother, that Shadow really does eat people." Joe's whole family seemed possessed, lining up to have it pull out their entrails and hearts to eat. Not a sound. It ate the entrails. Shadow then pulled out the bones and chewed them whole. Joe's house was stuffed with straw and left by the pigsty. My face went ashen. That is Shadow. Eats people like that. People are like they're dreaming. They don't even know how to fight back. So it often finishes off several households in one night, and no one notices. Then how Cadan Thave screamed. It was probably just an encounter. Before Shadow could finish casting, Joe's family recognized him. Shadow went straight for the kill. He must have used Joe's to staff the scarecrow earlier, tricked them into opening the door, and then cast the spell. Uncle said, "Mother, what should we do?" "Use firecrackers," my grandma said. "Oh no, the firecrackers are all in the yard. It's snowing. They definitely can't be used." The three of us looked at each other, our throats tight, unable to say a word. At that moment, the village loudspeaker suddenly blared, and the village chief spoke. "Comrades of the collective, now I'll say 3 things. First, the blizzard has snapped the telephone lines. For the next 2 days, no household can make phone calls. The second thing, Old Han said he saw Shadow coming out of the old woods today. Every household should guard themselves." My grandmother mumbled, "That old man, how confused he is. At a time like this, shouldn't he be calling everyone together? Why tell each household to fend for themselves?" Uncle said, "Does that mean the village chief still doesn't believe what my grandfather said?" The village chief continued, "The third matter concerns the land behind the hill belonging to the Fong family, the Chung family, the Chien family, the Sun family, the Wong family. The heads of your households, come to my house. The geological team is going to requisition your land. Everyone, please cooperate." My grandmother grew paler the more she listened. Uncle asked what was going on. My grandmother said these 5 families were the ones who, more than 20 years ago, bombarded Shadowwand, then carried it out of the pit and burned it. I asked, "Weren't there 8 people? And your grandfather, the village chief, and Joe's family?" I suddenly felt that something was terribly wrong. I said, "Isn't it possible that the village chief wasn't deceived by Shadow? Think about it. If the ones who knocked just now had been from the survey team, they wouldn't have mentioned Shadow. If it as Shadow, the village chief also said it was an exploration team. The only possibility is that the village chief is lying, right? Then why would he lie?" Uncle asked. I was so startled by my own thoughts that my mouth wouldn't obey me. Grandpa just said that thing. After hearing his voice, it can imitate his voice. Then would it, after hearing the village chief's voice, imitate the village chief? Are you saying the one who called and shouted to the loudspeaker just now was Shadow? The uncle's voice changed. Think about it. The village chief said Joe's family should stay home and cook. Today, when my grandpa came back, he said that the village dog was terribly frightened. Could it be? The village head's house, Joe's house have all been eaten. My grandpa is going now. It's just the right time to walk straight into the trap. Wouldn't that make all 8 families complete? Only if we kill the shadows of 3 families will we know we don't need to call those 3 over. Otherwise, our families and Aunt's land behind the hill also matters. Why wouldn't we call them? Uncle grew anxious as soon as he heard that. My grandmother was getting anxious too. Uncle said, "I'm going to save my father." My grandmother said, "It's definitely too late to find your father now. You stay home and watch Tony. I'll go to the back alley to find Shaman." Shamani's the well-known spirit medium in our area. Although he is very effective at investigating and resolving matters, he is also very sinister. Ordinary people dare not seek him out. I asked, "Granny, is this shadow some kind of spirit?" My granny said, "Child, don't ask too many questions." Uncle didn't agree to let my granny go. He said Granny hadn't even reached the back street before night would fall. Too dangerous. My grandma said, "I can count them." Uncle said, "Then I'll go." We had just opened the door when we heard someone knocking at the courtyard gate. The three of us immediately didn't dare to make a sound. Outside the gate, my grandfather's angry voice rang out. "Damn it, the village chief doesn't believe it. He even called people together to discuss digging for gold. You've already lost your life, and you still want gold." We still didn't dare make a sound, because we knew Shadow would imitate my grandfather's voice. And we had agreed on a knock signal with my grandfather. But there had been only 3 knocks just now. We didn't dare to prompt him, nor to move. At that moment, I heard my grandfather mutter to himself, "Ah, I was so angry I forgot. I've forgotten the signal." As she spoke, there came 3 heavy knocks followed by 2 light ones on the door. I happily wanted to go up and open the door. Grandma grabbed me. She said, "Old man, wait a moment, okay? Daniel, David are cutting the ham. I am kneading the dough. I'll wash my hands and come open the door." My grandfather said, "Hurry up. It's getting dark." After he spoke, my grandmother and my uncle were both startled to span. Daniel Davidair, my eldest uncles, and my father's nicknames. They weren't home at all. If it really were my grandfather, he could not have known. My grandmother gave us a look, and we quietly slipped back into the house. Uncle asked, "Mom, was that really not my grandfather?" My grandmother's eyes were red. "Definitely not. Didn't you notice the 3 knocks at the start were the same as in the afternoon?" "Uncle, then what do we do?" "Grandma, Tony and I will stay right here. I'll go distracted in a bit. You climb the ladder and get over the roof to the back alley. I can hold it off for a while. You hurry and find Shaman. Otherwise, none of us will make it out alive today." I asked in a low voice, "So my grandfather, did he turn into a straw man?" Grandma hugged me without making a sound. After a while, I felt water fall on my forehead. When I looked up, I saw Grandma's eyes full of tears and regret. The knocking sounded again. My grandma replied, "Don't worry, I'm coming." "You old fool. Why are you in such a hurry? Can't you wait for me?" I always felt there was something more to my grandma's words. The person outside the door said, "Walk more slowly. This really does look a lot like my grandfather." My grandma's foot slipped off a step. "Ow, my tailbone. Ouch. It's dark. I didn't see the steps. Ouch. I'm gonna die from the fall. I can't get up. Tony Jack, hurry and give me a hand." Uncle has already climbed out onto the roof. I gave a quick reply and ran over, running and crying at the same time. "Mama, what's wrong with you? What's wrong?" I was really crying, because I knew my grandfather, who loved me, was gone. I cried for my grandpa. My grandmother kept saying, "I-oh." I just kept crying. I sneaked back into the room and bolted the door. After thinking for a moment, the 2 of us struggled to lift the 8 Immortals table and wedge it against the door. After a long while, there was no sound outside the door, but a whiff of damp, grassy, fishy smell drifted in. It smelled very much like the old grove. The fishy stench grew stronger and stronger. I knew it was all around me, getting closer and closer, but I couldn't see it. Suddenly the roof began to creak and groan. My heart instantly jumped into my throat. My grandma held me tightly in her arms and said, "Tony, don't be afraid. Grandma won't let him hurt you." Grandma's expression was very calm. She tried to make me believe it was nothing and that I shouldn't be afraid. But she was trembling. I was trembling too. The smell of blood and fish grew stronger. I asked, "Nye, will we end up like the Joe family?" Nye trembled as she said, "Tony, everything is fate." Just then, we heard 2 thump-thump sounds from the courtyard. Then the door was knocked on again. "Mother, shaman, Annie Have come together. Uncle's voice, but the metallic smell of blood still hung in the air. I told my grandmother not to open the door yet. I pointed to my nose, indicating there was a smell. Uncle did not come into the house. He and Shaman were busy in the yard, measuring something. After a while, Shaman took 2 pieces of dry firewood from under the woodpile in the yard and lit them. He was in the yard, muttering incantations as he played with them. The smell of fishy blood was gone. I opened the door, wanting to let Uncle them in. But the moment I opened the door, a massive shadow descended. I was instantly frozen in place. The silhouette in the mist revealed its true form. Long, dark fur, the hair on its head hanging down like a hat. Green eyes, really as big as a rice bowl. One of its eyes stared at me fixedly. With each motion of its hand, it pulled out Shaman's entrails and swallowed them whole. Then it plucked out his bones one by one. It chewed a few times and swallowed them. A stain that might have been blood or marrow dripped from the corner of its mouth. Uncle stood, dumbfounded behind it. I felt as if I had been enchanted, unable to move or make sound. I watched as he finished chewing the bones and then came toward me and my grandmother. Grandmother resignedly closed her eyes. But that shadow did not eat us. He just herded the 3 of us together and led us outside. He seemed to be in a great hurry. He was puffing and panting, trying to scare us. When we passed the village chief's house, I saw that the courtyard gate was unlocked. The wind blew, and the door clanged, opening and closing and opening, as if no one had ever existed. Only blood stains lay on the ground, darker than the color of this night. Shadow was constantly driving us toward the old grove. I wanted to cry for help, but no sound would come out. I desperately hoped someone would come and rescue us. But the whole village was eerily silent. Not even a dog barked. It was as if the entire village had died in its sleep. Shadow had driven us all the way to the ruined ancestral hall outside the old grove. He leapt and went straight into the old woods. I seemed to have fallen asleep. I had a dream. I saw young Grandpa and a group of people fiddling with cannons. A huge black animal lay not far away. The animal seemed to be in a lot of pain, without strength. Then there was a flash of fire, and a cannon shot out. Almost at the same time, the creature let out a miserable howl. It reached out its sharp claw and dug something straight out of its own belly, flinging it far away. Those who were setting off the firecrackers didn't notice. Next, my younger and I was feeding a little animal congee. Then she drove the little animal off to the old grove. Then Shadow whoppered. I said, "You brat, give me back my grandfather." He said, "Your grandfather killed my mother, so I killed him too. The people who wronged my mother, I ate their entire families. But your grandfather spared my mother's child, so I spared his child as well. Your grandmother saved me, so I saved you all. We don't owe each other anything. Those people killed your mother because your mother killed their child. This was our territory to begin with. We ate grass, ate leaves, ate water lilies. You were the ones who came and occupied it, and wiped out our entire clan. Don't you think you deserve to die? Our old home really used to be nothing but forest. A logging crew came in and gradually cleared it to form our village." I asked again, "Then why did you kill Shaman?" "He was a shaman, but he didn't keep the pact with a mountain god to guard the territory. What use is he then?" Although the dream was disjointed, it felt real. I seemed to know I was dreaming, yet I couldn't wake up. When I woke again, I was stunned by the scene before me. The sky and earth split apart. From a distance, the whole village had become a wasteland. The fissures in the fields ran in lines, some a few meters to tens of meters wide and hundreds of meters long, black and unfathomably deep. The old grove was even more uncanny. It had become a great canyon, as if cut by knives and axes. My grandma woke up. I asked my grandma, was it because the shadow we bombarded back then shadow was about to become a mother? My grandmother nodded. She lost the ability to resist because she was about to give birth. "You save her baby." My grandmother nodded again. I dreamt the mountain god asked me to help save him. They said their clan has existed for tens of thousands of years. The mountain god said, "If he dies, our village will perish too." After your grandfather discovered it, I begged him to spare it. No wonder my grandpa, said it was smarter than its mother. So my grandpa knew too. But my grandma's eyes were full of regret. If we hadn't saved it back then, so many people wouldn't have died, and your grandpa wouldn't have died either. I didn't know what to say for a moment. At that moment, Uncle also woke up. He looked around groggily and shouted loudly, "Holy crap! It's an earthquake!" The three of us hurried to run into the village. The earthquake was truly catastrophic. The entire village couldn't find any living person with all their limbs intact. The official rescue teams moved in. They brought the latest news. A magnitude 8.0 shallow earthquake struck H City. The earthquake's epicenter was right in our village. Out of the village's 136 people, fewer than 1/5 survived. And the ancestral hall, where we stayed, was the only building not destroyed by the quake. The 8 households that originally fired on Shadow in the village. Aside from the 3 of us who survived, no one else could even be found as a corpse. The authorities attributed it all to a natural disaster. When Uncle told the working team that Shadow was killing people, the team sternly criticized him. Shadowy's just a legend. It doesn't really exist. The people who died in the village, the ones whose bodies weren't found, simply fell into the earth fissures. We are materialists. We don't believe in those supernatural forces. Stop promoting feudal superstitions. The 3 of us were left speechless by the lecture. After the earthquake, our old village was no longer habitable, and the villagers all moved away. Shadow never appeared again. Over time, memories began to fade. Soon, I no longer really believed Shadow was necessarily real. I convinced myself that I was too small and too scared back then. I listened to my grandmother, and with the added environmental stimuli, I developed delusions. But affected by this incident, I studied philosophy and folk literature at university. I have been searching Shadow's traces in ancient books. I saw in the classic of mountains and seas, West Mountain, that there is a divine beast called the fierce leopard. Among the beasts are many fierce leopards. In Shanhai Jing annotations and commentaries, it is believed that the fierce leopard is the Mo leopard, an animal resembling a leopard called the Mo. I also saw in folk records of strange phenomena that the Shanhai Jing records a magical creature, the dream-eating beast, also called the dream Mo. The dream Mo feeds on dreams, can create dreams, can devour nightmares, and can reproduce dreamscapes. This is Shadow really very similar to. Only that portion of the classic of mountains and seas was lost. I keep wondering, does that dream-eating beast really exist only in mythology? In our field, there's a proposition that can neither be proven nor disproven. If a divine beast wants to remain in the world, then the records about it must be lost to the world. When you see a classic recording some kind of divine beast, it means you can no longer find it in this world. So, is there really Shadow? Shadow, is it the mythical dream-eating beast, the tapir? It seems impossible to prove. My grandmother lived to 88 years old. She was always very healthy. She seemed to sense it the day she left. She called me over and whispered, "Tony, if you go back to our hometown, go take a look at the big canyon in the old forest." I heard it's become a tourist hotspot. I always feel unsettled. I feel that Shadow is still there. Go tell the government, don't let people go there for tourism. I said, "Grandma, don't worry. It's been 20 years. Shadow has never appeared again. It's certain it died in the earthquake." My grandmother said, "All right." Just before she closed her eyes, she suddenly fixed her gaze intently on the door. Bang, bang, bang. 3 heavy knocks. That sound, I hadn't heard it in 20 years, had I? I felt a chill run down my spine. I turned my head, and the door opened. My wife stood there, smiling at me.